name is Heather, and this is another episode of Innocence Lost, my Wrongful Conviction Series. And we are going to, as depicted here on the thumbnail, we're going to discuss Kennedy Brewer and Levon Brooks and the ripple effects of a wrongful conviction. So, this case in particular has a lot of, here I am. This case has a lot of instances that can show you how when investigators are on the wrong path and take the wrong person down for a crime, it has so many ripple effects because the wrong person is sitting in prison, the actual perpetrator is out and about ready to do more crimes, and the families of the innocent people are greatly affected, and the relationships between those individuals sometimes is irreparable. I mean, and then there's that doubt in a family member's mind, like, did my family member do this and all that. So, I mean, it's a huge, huge ripple effect that it has on our society when the police convict someone, or when our justice system is not just the police, it's the prosecutors, it's everybody. When we, and the jurors, when we convict people who are who are not guilty of the crime, then it is just a travesty to us all. So we're going to read through Levon Brooks' case, which is very related to the Kennedy Brewer case, and then we're going to watch a documentary that I found about the case. Sorry, there's like a fuzz, I think, on my camera. Okay, so we're going to watch a documentary after we discuss their cases, and it's really good, and it does show even more sides of the justice system and how more people can be affected. So this is the story, first up, of Levon Brooks, as depicted in the picture on the screen. Levon Brooks served 16 years in Mississippi prisons for a 1990 and unaliving of a 3-year-old girl that he didn't commit. In 2008, DNA testing cleared another man, Kennedy Brewer, who had been sentenced for his life to end for a nearly identical unaliving of a little girl, very close in time, that happened in the same town less than 2 years after the crime for which Brooks was convicted. So, very similar crime, but the police aren't connecting that it's the same person because they got Levon Brooks here and then they're going to convict someone else in the future. All right, so the DNA results implicated the perpetrator of the crime, and he confessed to committing both of the unalivings, clearing Brooks and Brewer. I mean, Brewer was cleared by DNA, but then that's a whole story altogether, so we'll get to that. So Levon Brooks served 16 years behind prison walls for a crime that he didn't commit. This was in Mississippi. Here are his charges. And the conviction was capital M and battery of a physical nature, and he got life in prison. So, the exonerations of 2 men, both Innocent Project clients, revealing troubling problems with autopsies and forensic oversight in Mississippi and the underlying shortcomings of bite mark comparison evidence. So, as we all know now, bite mark evidence, it's junk science. It's not true. You can't rely on it. There's no scientifically proven, this is the bite mark that comes off of this tooth. There's no way in our technology now that we are able to do that, and we've proven that it's junk science. So, but it was used in this case by an odontologist guy, whatever. All right, so the crime. Late at night on September 15th, 1990, 3-year-old Courtney Smith was abducted from her Brooksville, Mississippi home. The girl shared a bedroom with her 2 sisters, ages 6 and 1. Her 26-year-old uncle was asleep in the next room when she disappeared. Her body was found 2 days later in a pond 80 yards from her house. She had been SA'd and unalived. The investigation, Levon Brooks became a suspect because he was an ex-boyfriend of Smith's mother. Another man, Justin Albert Johnson, who also briefly was a suspect in the case, his ex-wife and son lived near the Smith residence, and he had been inside the Smith house on the day of the abduction. Dr. Stephen Hain, and we'll learn more about him in the documentary, a Mississippi pathologist, performed an autopsy on the victim shortly after her body was found. He determined that she had been SA'd. He also found possible bite marks on her wrist and referred the case to a Dr. Michael West, a forensic dentist in Mississippi who had worked with Hain on other cases in the past. West determined that the marks on the victim's body were indeed human bite marks, and he took dental impression samples from 12 possible suspects, including Justin Albert Johnson, but not including Levon Brooks. Yeah. All right, so 10 days after the victim was unalived, police interviewed the victim's 6-year-old sister. The girl's sister said that she had seen the perpetrator abduct the victim and identified the perpetrator as Levon Brooks, her mother's ex-boyfriend, based on the girl's identification, a 5-year-old girl. A 6-year-old girl. Sorry, they say 5 in the documentary, so I don't know, 5 or 6. A 5 or 6-year-old girl's witness statement is basically the strongest evidence you have in this case, and that is what you convict the boyfriend on. Ex-boyfriend, sorry. On the same day, September 25th, West took a sample of Brooks' teeth at the local jail. West testified at Brooks' trial that he compared Brooks' sample to the marks on the victim's body and found that 2 of Brooks' teeth matched the marks on the victim's body. He said Brooks made the marks with his 2 top front teeth. Brooks was charged with capital M. And I want to point out that in both cases, they describe biting from just the top part of the mouth and not leaving bottom teeth impressions, which is nearly impossible. So, I don't know. They get into that too. So, all right, so the trial, Brooks was tried before a jury in Noxubee County, Mississippi in January 1992. The victim's sister testified that she saw Brooks abduct her sister, although her testimony had several contradictions. In addition to the child's unreliable testimony, the state's case rested on the bite mark evidence presented by Dr. West, who testified that, quote, it could be no one but Levon Brooks that bit the girl's arm, end quote. Brooks' defense attorneys represented an alibi defense that he was working a club on the night of the murder and did not have an opportunity to commit the crime. The defense also challenged West's credentials and findings. Keep that in mind. We'll talk about that too. After, or at least the documentary will. So after deliberating for about 9 hours, the jury convicted Brooks of capital M. He was sentenced to life in prison. So for whatever reason, they didn't go for the DP, so he got life. Post-conviction appeals and exoneration. Just 4 months after Brooks was convicted, another young girl was abducted, AR'd, and unalived in Brooksville. The facts were startlingly similar. A 3-year-old girl taken from her home at night and found in a creek. But the similarities between the cases did not end there. Police focused on Kennedy Brewer, the boyfriend of the victim's mother. Dr. Stephen Hain conducted the autopsy and said he found bite marks on the victim's body. West was called to analyze the bite marks. He confirms that the marks were from a human bite and determined that they came from Brewer. So Kennedy Brewer, is our other person that we're going to talk about, our other wrongfully convicted individuals. So, where was I? Based on this evidence, Brewer was convicted in 1995 and sentenced to the DP. So he got the DP. The Innocence Project became involved in Brewer's case in 2001, consulting with Brewer's attorneys on DNA testing issues. DNA test results showed that fluid from a male from the victim's body excluded Brewer as the perpetrator of the crime, and his conviction was overturned. He remained behind bars, though, for 6 more years. However, waiting a new trial. This is ridiculous and beyond egregious. Another round of testing matched the profile of Justin Albert Johnson, who had been a suspect during the initial investigations because they took his DNA. They took swabs of him, his mouth and whatnot, blood, I think, samples. So Johnson was interviewed by law enforcement officials, and he admitted to committing both crimes, but admittedly denied biting either girl. Following his confession, Brewer and Brooks were both freed on February 15th, 2008. Brooks was officially cleared on March 13th. Forensic fallout. In the wake of the exonerations of Brewer and Brooks, the Innocence Project and several other organizations and individuals began to call for investigations into the work of Hain and West. For years, Hain claimed to conduct 1,200 to 1,800 autopsies a year across the state of Mississippi, which is 6 times the professional standard. You're not supposed to do more than like 125, 150 per year because, I mean, you can't, how can you do that many and do them right and effectively? That's several a day to be doing that. All right, so earning him more than $1 million a year was his profession. Yeah, okay, in the state of Mississippi. All right, so Hain had served as Mississippi's chief medical examiner in the late 1980s and early 1990s, but couldn't fill the position permanently because the state required the official to be properly board certified, which he was not. He lied on the stand multiple times that he was board certified, and he was never board certified. The position has been vacant for more than 15 years, however, and Hain was essentially filling the role on a de facto basis. In August of 2008, just months after the Brewer and Brooks exonerations, the state announced that it was severing all ties with Hain, the forensics medical examiner. So in January 2018, Levon Brooks unfortunately passed away from cancer at the age of 58. Brooks and Brewer are 2 of the 8 people whose story is in the Innocence Project inspired Netflix docuseries The Innocence Files, which I'm sure I've seen in the past when it came out because I watch all those true crime things. So again, Levon Brooks served 16 years and was serving for life in prison for a crime that he did not commit. And unfortunately, he's no longer with us today. And that's a lot of his life that he lost. All right, so moving to Kennedy Brewer. As like I said, these cases definitely align because one, wrongful conviction, and then another crime could happen following that from the actual perpetrator. So he's on the streets committing more crimes. So here's Kennedy Brewer's story. In 1992, Kennedy Brewer was arrested in Mississippi and accused of ending his girlfriend's 3-year-old daughter's life. After waiting in jail for 3 years for a trial to begin, Brewer was convicted of capital M and sent to Mississippi DR. In 2001, DNA tests proved that he did not commit the crime, leading his conviction to be overturned. The prosecutors said they intended to retry him. They wanted to retry him because of the whole sample that they got off the girl and something they thought that there were 2 profiles, but there really weren't, and just really horrible investigative work. So the prosecutors wanted to retry the case. So for that reason, he sat in prison for another 5 years, even though the DNA test excluded Brewer. He was still sitting in prison for another 5 years. All right, so he remained in jail for over 5 more years until his release on bail in August 2007. On February 15th, 2008, after an Innocence Project investigation led to an alternate suspect in the case, Brewer became the first person to be exonerated through post-conviction DNA testing in Mississippi. So that is good. Good, good, good. He had served 7 years on the DR and 8 years in jail awaiting a new trial to be charged again, even though he was excluded. So the crime and the investigation in the early morning hours of, well, we went through all the other crime, but when it starts to intertwine, well, this is a different crime. So in the early morning hours of May 3rd, 1992, Christine Jackson, the 3-year-old daughter of Brewer's girlfriend, Gloria Jackson, was abducted from her home, Ard, and unalived. Brewer had spent that evening babysitting Christine and her 2 younger siblings, who were Brewer's biological children, with Gloria. 2 days after Christine's disappearance, her body was found in a creek in Noxubee County, about 500 yards from her home. Police suspected Brewer because he had been at home that night and there was no sign of forced entry. However, a broken window near where the child slept could have provided an entry point. Like what? So you see that there's a broken window, but you decide that there was no forced entry. Okay, even though the window's right by where the girl was abducted. The trial began in March 1995, nearly 3 years after Brewer was arrested. The prosecution theorized that Brewer had Ard and unalived Christine in the Jackson home and then carried her body to the creek. A sample of male fluid stuff was recovered from the victim's body, but was deemed insufficient for DNA testing. And again, this is 1995. Well, when it happened, it was 1992, so even earlier in time, and there was not the advanced technology that we have in DNA now, where we can take a small sample and kind of replicate it and fill in the holes that they can do now to make a more complete profile when they have just a little bit. They weren't able to do that in the past. So somehow we all had the foresight to like save DNA, which is great, but they didn't know what to do with it. So yeah, so they said insufficient for DNA testing. The medical examiner who conducted the autopsy, Stephen Hain, testified that he had found several marks on the child's body that he believed to be bite marks. Hain called in Dr. Michael West, a forensic odontologist, to analyze the marks. West concluded that 19 marks found on the victim's body were, quote, indeed and without a doubt, end quote, inflicted by Brewer. He further asserted that all 19 marks were made only by Brewer's top 2 teeth. Remember what I said? How do you bite with only your top 2 teeth? And that somehow the bottom teeth made no impression. West claimed a degree of certainty that exceeded the limits of bite mark analysis. So he gave more certain of an answer that was actually allowed to be given in describing this particular science, because it's not really validated. It has not been scientifically validated. There we go. So he was already discredited by the time of Brewer's trial. So he testified in the Levon Brooks trial, and then by the time the Brewer trial comes up, he's already been debunked, basically. But he was discredited at the time as the first member ever to be suspended from the American Board of Forensic Odontology. Regardless, though, the court allowed his testimony, which is mind-boggling. In response, the defense introduced Dr. Richard Silveron, a licensed dentist and founding member of the American Board of Forensic Odontology, who testified that the marks were not human bite marks at all, but were insect bites that the body sustained from being left in the water for days. Silveron argued that it would be all but impossible to leave repeated bite mark impressions with only the top 2 teeth. Brewer was convicted of capital M and battery on March 24th, 1995, and sentenced to unaliving to the DP. He had maintained his innocence in the crime, and his conviction was based almost entirely on the questionable bite mark evidence. Other physical evidence included various small spots, red spots, on Brewer's clothing, a stain consistent with feces on a dress near where the victim slept, and another stain on a blanket found next to where the child was sleeping. However, the state forensic scientist was unable to identify the ABO BLOOD group through serological testing in order to determine the source. Post conviction appeals in 2001, advanced DNA testing was conducted on the fluid recovered in 1992 from the victim's body. Sorry, my dog needs her blanket and she's being really needy. Okay, she's good now. Sorry. She loves to be part of the show, I tell you. All right, so post conviction appeals, they weren't able to identify whatever serological source that they needed. So, post conviction appeals in 2001, advanced DNA testing was conducted on the fluid recovered in 1992 from the body. The tests produced results excluding Brewer as a possible perpetrator and revealed an unknown male profile. The prosecution conducted further testing on two of Brewer's friends who were also excluded. The YSTR testing also excluded many of Brewer's relatives. No subsequent effort was made to identify the real perpetrator once he was excluded. So the following year, Brewer's conviction was vacated and he was moved from DR to the pretrial detention. The prosecution intended to retry Brewer for capital M, but for a full 5 years, the case was not moved to trial. Like I said, he sat there for 5 years in prison waiting for a trial. Due to conflicts of interest in the Noxubee County District Attorney's Office in 2007, Ben Creekmore, the District Attorney of Oxford, Mississippi, was appointed special prosecutor in the Brewer case. Creekmore decided not to seek the DP and agreed not to oppose bail. Brewer was released in August 2007 while a new trial was still pending. He was released on bail. So during preparations for Brewer's retrial, the Innocence Project asked the Mississippi Attorney General's office to intervene in the investigation of the case. DNA testing during this investigation led to the implication of another man as the real perpetrator. The unidentified DNA profile discovered in 2001 matched to Justin Albert Johnson, one of the original suspects. Just sitting there in their files, but the wrong men are sitting in prison. It's awful. All right, so Johnson then confessed to Christine Jackson's unaliving as well as to an identical crime, the unaliving of Courtney Smith, committed in September of 1990, also in Noxubee County. Johnson assured the investigators that he acted alone in both crimes. So he admitted to both crimes, like we said in the other article. 18 months before Brewer was arrested in the other crime, three-year-old Smith was and unalived and left in a pond. Okay, so we read all that. So on February 15th, 2008, charges against Kennedy Brewer were dropped and he was exonerated on the same day. The Innocence Project, along with Mississippi Innocence Project co-counsel, won Brooks' release from prison. So they both were released from prison the same day. Brooks was subsequently exonerated in March. Okay, so he didn't get out until March, though. He was represented by the Innocence Project and Mississippi Innocence Project. Since DNA testing could not be conducted in his case, he was exonerated based on Johnson's confession and other evidence and is not listed as a DNA exoneration case. So it was because there was a confession from someone else and some other things, probably inconsistencies and whatnot that they could find. So, like we said, this is featured on the Netflix series The Innocence Project. In this part, and we'll talk. The documentary speaks to this as well, but the loss of mother, and stroke. So in March 2020, Kennedy's mother passed away, and he had a stroke a few days later. Thankfully, he was recovering, but it's likely he will be able it's unlikely, sorry, he will be able to return to work anytime soon. Following his exoneration, he received woefully inadequate compensation from the state of Mississippi and has spent the years since his release working various difficult factory jobs, including at a chicken processing plant and doing repairs at a catfish farm. His family is raising money for him for those willing to support, and you can support here if you want to. You can do this on the innocenceproject.org website. I am on the cases page for Kennedy Brewer. So now we're going to switch gears here to, I'm going to zoom in and go to some video. Oh, you know what? Let me move my logo here. All right, get that out of the way. Using that to block another logo before. So here we go. We're going to watch this. This is a really good in-depth documentary about Levon Brooks and Kennedy Brewer and their whole story and how it intertwines and how a wrongful conviction can have a severe ripple effect throughout a community. So here we go. Oh, you know what? I had it on 1.5. I'm going to slow it down to 1.25. If it's too fast for you, feel free to slow it down. I like this music. I don't want to skip forward. I could. I don't want to. If you don't want to see the credits, turn that down. If you don't want to see the credits, I recommend skipping through, but I don't want to because I wanted to make sure that people got the credit that is due to them. So
Down in Macon, Mississippi, in Noxubee, not too far from the Alabama border, Kennedy Brewer lived in a small house on a rural road with his girlfriend who had 3 children. One night, Kenny stayed home with the kids, and his girlfriend Gloria went out with her friends, came home. They both went to bed, and the kids slept in the same bedroom. It was a very simple house. And the one child, Christine, slept on a pallet, a wooden pallet at the foot of the bed beneath the window. And when they woke up in the morning, the child was gone. The 2 babies were asleep on the bed, but the oldest kid, Christine, was gone.
So I said, around 7, maybe 7:30 that morning, we got up. Well, Gloria, she got up, and she asked me, what Christine was. I said, what do you mean, what Christine is? So we searched and looked, went everywhere and looked, and so we still didn't find her. So we called the police and let them know that Christine was missing.
he has a very thick Mississippi accent. As you can tell, the captions don't quite match up to what he's saying, but it kind of gives you the point, I think. But I'm going to leave them on because they are helpful when he's talking, because I have trouble kind of understanding it. So it's helpful.
When we got there was a lot of people over there looking for the little girl, and of course I went into the house. The house was pretty much a wreck. I don't know, when I went into the house, I said, well, how did anybody possibly get in here and get this little girl without waking everybody up,
Broken window.
There was a creek down behind the house there a good little ways, and but a guy from down below Meridian brought 2 bloodhounds up there. And They tracked the dogs tracked right to that spot.
It was too thick, the terrain was for us to walk. And so we had the helicopter, which I requested the Navy helicopter to come up and help us in the rescue of trying to locate and find her.
We flew that creek, and that's when they set it down, and the blade boiled that water up, and she floated to the top.
There are graphic images, just so you know.
She had been strangled, and she had been sexually assaulted.
They're not too bad. I mean, they're graphic, but they're not too shocking, too horrific. I don't know. Where's my trigger warning? Maybe I should put the trigger warning up. Trigger warning. Here we go. Sorry.
And she had scratch marks on her body.
Noxubee County law enforcement did what they routinely did, which was, in these kinds of cases, they rounded up all the people, mostly males, who had been in the vicinity of Christine's house in the roughly 24 hours prior to her disappearance. They took them all down to Noxubee General Hospital, and they took blood, they pulled head hairs and pubic hairs, and they also did a cheek swab of each suspect's mouth as a routine law enforcement procedure. And pretty quickly thereafter,
So hairs and a cheek swab from a bunch of males that were suspects or, had criminal past that could have potentially been, a suspect in this. So they lined up a bunch of guys in the community. So they lined up the actual perpetrator, but they completely excluded him, or they were oblivious to him because they focused in on Kennedy Brewer because of bite marks that weren't really, they were bite marks, but they were insect bite marks. So insect and human bite marks, totally different.
the two individuals that they focused on became their main suspects were Kennedy Brewer and Gloria Jackson, Kennedy's girlfriend.
The girlfriend.
Well, they immediately arrested Kennedy Brewer. They also arrested Gloria, the girlfriend, the mother of the child. They didn't have a motive. They didn't have any direct evidence. But the police thought, well, heck, they were the last people to see Christine. It must be them. But they didn't have any direct evidence. What the prosecutor did, a fellow named Forrest Allgood, who I'm told put more people on death row than any current working prosecutor in the state, summoned for assistance a forensic pathologist who he used to use all the time, a guy named Stephen Hain.
Dr. Stephen Hain ends up being the person, the pathologist, that performs the autopsy on Christine Jackson. I really shouldn't say ends up. At the time, Stephen Hain was the go-to person. He was the de facto pathologist for much of central Mississippi. As a consequence, he was doing, by his own claims, hundreds and hundreds of autopsies every year. And one happened to be Christine Jackson.
Hain had found marks on the child that he said were suggestive of bite marks. He did not claim to be an expert in that field, and he suggested Michael West.
Michael West is a dentist in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. He carved out a little niche for himself as this really innovative bite mark expert. He had developed this unique system of finding and identifying bite marks by using what he modestly called the West phenomenon, which is where he would use a black light and yellow goggles, and with these two tools he could find and identify bite marks that no other doctor could see.
It's crazy.
Dr. West examined the marks on Christine's body, found that indeed they were bite marks. According to Dr. West, there were so many bite marks that they eventually stopped counting. I think he identified 19 in all that he could say for certain were bite marks and that he could use in his analysis.
Michael West looked at it and said, get me the bite, the dentures of the suspect. And so Forrest Allgood had the officer get a denture of Kennedy Brewer, one of Gloria as well.
Those suck.
So Dr. West comes up to Dr. Hain's morgue, as I recall, with the bite mark molds. And he takes the mold and he compares the...
If you've never had a mold of your teeth, I had to because I needed a bite plate, and it like gagged me. That stuff that they put in there, that it's like a almost like a clay foam thing that they spray in there, and then it hardens in your mouth, and it's like it filled up my whole mouth and almost gagged me. It was so disgusting. But anyway, they're not fun.
Teeth molds to the marks on Christine's body.
Come straight on. There you go. Now roll it. Great. Now go line them up on the 2 dots and go in the other direction. Nope, you ain't on the 2 dots. Yeah. Now drag it. Rotate the wrist towards me. There we go. All right, do it.
As soon as Dr. West confirmed that the bite marks on Christine's body belonged to no one other than Kennedy Brewer, that was it. The law enforcement investigation halted. Kennedy Brewer, at the next term of the grand jury in Noxubee, was indicted. Forrest Allgood, who was going to prosecute the case, decided that he would seek the death penalty. And then there was a trial. The prosecution's case didn't change. It was essentially Dr. West's testimony. And as it turned out, that was enough. That was enough for the prosecution. That was enough for a jury. That was enough for a conviction on the capital murder charges. And after 2 hours of deliberation, that was also enough to sentence Mr. Brewer to die by lethal injection.
Sometimes all it takes... Whoa, sorry, my dog is freaking out now. Now she wants to get up. Okay, hold on. So... Okay, so sometimes that's all it takes is an expert on the stand that misrepresents something, and somebody goes to jail for the rest of their lives, or on DP. They go on the DP and their lives are ended because the state puts on some expert that misrepresents some of the evidence, and therefore it's taking the lives of innocent people. These people, I forgot to mention, so Kennedy Brewer spent 15 years for the crimes. We didn't go over that. So 16 and 15 years. 31 years altogether for 2 crimes that are related. One of them could have been prevented if they put the right person away in the first place. Christine could have been alive today if they got the right person in the Levon Brooks case. But because they didn't, there's a huge ripple effect. So sorry, I didn't. You can't even see, but it says 15 years. Anyways, go on.
Man, found me guilty then. They read the verdict, they said death. I couldn't believe, I was speechless, I couldn't say nothing. Because I know all this here was nothing but a lie.
If you're sentenced to death, they take you from the courtroom to death row. There's no time to prepare for it. You're sentenced to death, and within hours, you're there on the row.
Within hours, your life is completely taken away from you.
That day I got over there, I didn't put me on one-man cell. I think it was cell 285. You go outside for 1 hour a day, and from there, you back in your cell the rest of the day till the next morning.
What an isolating feeling to be, first of all, to get convicted of a crime that you didn't commit, and then to be whipped right out of the courthouse into the prison on DP, and you get 1 hour outside of your cell every day, and you don't talk to people. You don't get interactions with other humans very often. Just imagine how isolating that would feel.
Hello, Mama, how are you at this present time? Well, I hope this letter finds you in the best of health and take good care of yourself. As for me, I've been doing all right myself, but it would be nice to be at home instead of sitting in prison for nothing. I pray to God each day and night asking him to help me because Lord, I know that I didn't do nothing to that little girl, and I truly believe by his help, I'll be free one of these days. I just ask him to give me the heart, strength, and mind to deal with it each day and night and see me through it all. I've been locked up now for 4 years and 2 months for nothing, but I just keep my faith in God and go on. I have a very strong mind and heart, and by God's help, I know I'll make it. I'll be all right. So until next time, you take care and tell everybody I say hello and my kids when you see them again. So I hope to see you soon. Take care. Your son, Kenny.
Kenny Brewer has been on death row for 4 or 5 years. The court decided that it would appoint him appellate attorneys, as it was supposed to do. They ultimately filed in the Mississippi Supreme Court for relief, and the court fairly quickly and conclusively denied Mr. Brewer's claim. He went immediately to the United States Supreme Court, which refused to even hear it. And as I recall, it was less than 48 hours later that the Mississippi Attorney General's office moved to reschedule his execution date.
Wow.
But there was sort of a catch in this case, a glimmer of hope, as it were, and Kennedy knew about it. And that was this. When Christine's body was recovered, they had performed a rape kit on her body. And one of the things that they recovered was sperm from her vagina. And they knew about it at the trial. But at the time, in the early 90s, DNA evidence wasn't far enough along so that they could test it and get a profile. In the intervening years, 5 or 6 years, that Kenny was on death row waiting out his appeals, a couple things were going on. One was that DNA technology had come a long way, and they were now able to develop profiles from minute, small bits of evidence, like the kind that was in his case. The other thing was that Kenny Brewer had been paying attention, and he had been reading, and he had heard about this, at the time, relatively new office that had been opened by Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, the Innocence Project. And they had been using DNA evidence to prove that people who had been convicted were in fact innocent. And Kenny got the address, and he sat down on his bunk, I guess, in his cell on death row, and wrote a letter.
Dear Miss Green, how are you today? I know you probably don't know me, but the reason I'm writing is to ask, can you, Mr. Sheik, help me out concerning my case? Back in 1992, I was accused of killing a 3-year-old child, something I know I didn't do. I've been on death row in Mississippi for 5 years, and I know if I can't get someone to look into my case carefully, I know they will easily see that they have the wrong person locked up. I hope you all can help me because I don't want to lose my life for something I know I didn't do. I'll be looking forward to hearing from you soon. Sincerely, Kenny Brewer.
Kennedy did write to us. He wrote into the Innocence Project and he asked for help in getting DNA testing. And that is what led the Innocence Project to get involved and start consulting with the lawyers who were representing him at the time. Around 2001, the evidence from his case was sent to a laboratory called Reliagene. And Reliagene did DNA testing on one of the swabs. And the result they got showed male DNA and excluded unequivocally Kennedy Brewer. Those results suggested that there was DNA from 2 males, which seemed a bit odd, but there was no question that there was sperm that didn't belong to Kennedy Brewer. I assumed that his exoneration, his full exoneration, was just imminent and around the corner, but that wasn't the case.
Obviously, that's evidence that I think might very well impact the outcome of it, and so I agreed to set aside the conviction and put it back on the active docket. I did not think that that warranted dismissing the case. The Mississippi Supreme Court agreed with me on that. Graves wrote the opinion and said, just because it's not his semen in the vaginal vault That means he didn't rape her. It doesn't mean he didn't kill her. And that there was ample evidence yet and still to convict him of the capital murder.
What other evidence did they have other than he was in a house? That's not evidence.
It was just startling to us that the state was intent upon retrying him and resecuring a capital conviction in his case. You know, to go to a retrial, even with the DNA, we had to explain, we had to give the jury a reason. How did this happen? You know, how could it happen? And who might have really been responsible?
And as we were getting ready for trial, we began to learn that there was another case. That 18 months before Christine Jackson was abducted and sexually assaulted and killed, another 3-year-old girl was abducted from her house about a mile away from Christine's house, also sexually assaulted and killed. Only this time, instead of dropping the girl in a creek, the girl was deposited in a pond. So we began to investigate the other case as well. And that was a guy named Brooks.
In the Brooks case, you also had a 3-year-old girl who was abducted. Her name was Courtney Smith. And just like in the Kennedy Brewer case, she was in her home at night. Someone came in, abducted her, sexually assaulted her, manually strangled her, and dumped her in a nearby pond of water. Just like in the Kennedy Brewer case, Noxubee County law enforcement showed up. They rounded up essentially all the males who had been in the presence of Courtney's house in the 24 hours or so prior to her abduction. They arrested them and took them down to the jail, and then from there took them to Noxubee County General Hospital, where they pulled head hairs, pulled pubic hairs, took blood samples, and once again took cheek swabs. Unlike the Kennedy Brewer case, law enforcement claimed that they had found an eyewitness. That eyewitness was Courtney's 5-year-old sister. Her name was Ashley.
She was certain of who it was she saw. She knew him because he used to date her mother. And she knew him by the name of Ty T. That was the name she called him. And she said that Ty T came in and got Courtney and carried her off.
Yeah, they say they had a witness against me, and I had become a suspect in a murder case. So they just kept asking the same question over and over again, talking about, was you here, was you here? I told them, man, I was at work. I said, I never did leave work. They still didn't believe nothing.
Just as in the...
He had an alibi with corroborating witnesses, I'm assuming. Did they even check?
Christine Jackson case, Kennedy Brewer's case. Courtney Smith's body was transferred to Dr. Hain. He engaged in a sort of quick analysis, and just as in the Christine Jackson case, he saw marks which he believed might be bite marks. He then called in his colleague, Dr. West, and just as in the Kennedy Brewer case, Dr. West examines Courtney Smith's body, determines that, yes, in fact, these marks are bite marks. And just as in the Kennedy Brewer case, Dr. West took Levon Brooks's bite mark molds and, after his analysis, claimed that they matched, indeed and without doubt. The law enforcement investigation stopped at that point, and he became not only then the prime suspect, but he became the person that committed the offense. He was already arrested, but the process started then, and he was ultimately indicted, charged with capital murder, and the state decided to seek the death penalty in his case.
Because of a 5-year-old.
When I got indicted, it really tore me apart because I was still wondering what is going on. You know, this is a question that I'm asking inside, and I kept asking people, what is going on? Because I ain't got no business in here. You know, this just was like a nightmare to me. And then we went to court, and I ain't never heard so many lies in my life.
Isn't it crazy? I mean, the more I dig into wrongfully convicted cases and cases where there's prosecutorial misconduct and things like that, it's ridiculous how much the state can lie. Investigators can lie. If you've got bad people in an organization, and bad people are everywhere, so it's gonna happen. You get corruption, and sometimes all it takes is 2, 3 people within an organization. Sometimes it's just one. I mean, you never know. So there's definitely some shady things going on.
I mean, you had several things that fell together. You had an eyewitness who said, that's the guy who came in and carried my sister off. The fact that Brooks knew
5-year-old.
the victim and that he was familiar with that house. Then you had the bite marks also. All I can say is, given the hand that we had, when you looked at the cards, he looked guilty.
But you also had a list of all the people that were in that house, and the actual perpetrator was one of them. He was in that house that day. They just showed it on the screen. Where was it? I don't know. They just showed it. I'm not gonna be able to find it quickly. But yeah, so anyways, we'll keep going. Point
Mr.
is-
Brooks puts on his alibi.
All I was saying, the point is that he had, they had the right guy, or they had one of the perpetrators in their list of suspects that night, but then they focused on the ex-boyfriend because of a 5-year-old's statement.
Or his lawyers do. Sort of not very well done, sort of ineffective, but it doesn't matter anyway. With that kind of evidence, it's essentially an open and shut case. Mr. Brooks gets convicted of capital murder.
The next day, I forgot what day it was, we come back up here for the sentencing phase. So the judge asked me, did I want to say anything before I'm sentenced? I said, yeah. So I got up. This is before the sentencing phase. I got up and I said, I know y'all done convict me for capital murder, but I didn't do it. Them all the words that I said. And I sat down. I sat down. Hope I didn't have nothing else to say. Next day they said sentencing to a life sentence in prison. I couldn't even believe that. And then plus I had a daughter that was just born at the time that I got sentenced. And I got a chance then to look at my daughter and then tell my girlfriend, just go on with your life. It tore me apart. I still couldn't even believe it.
So he was young at the time. He just had a daughter born, and he is facing life in prison. And he tells his girlfriend and basically his daughter, who's a newborn, goodbye. Like, go have a life without me because I can't be in it. That's everything. He gave up everything. His life, his girlfriend, or whatever she was. I don't know if they were engaged or married or whatnot. And the baby. That's a huge sacrifice. You've lost all those years. 16 years of your newborn's life. You don't see it, and having to say goodbye to your girlfriend, it's unbelievable that things like this can happen, and they are still happening. Even today, with our technology, people who are wrongfully convicted, or people who are not guilty of a crime, are being charged and or convicted of crimes. It's so much more than we can ever realize, because everybody thinks criminals lie, but so when they proclaim their innocence, they're just lying.
They sent me right to the heart of the penitentiary, 29, right where they banging and stabbing and killing it. When we got to the dorm at 29, The guys were hollering out the window, fresh meat. So we knew prisoners, that's what they hollering, fresh meat. So my friend said, what is they talking about, fresh meat? I said, shoot, they talking about us. It didn't really set in until, I say about a few months or a year after I was locked up. It really didn't set in. You know, like getting comfortable with the time that you know you're there and you gotta be there and you gotta maintain and try to survive the best way you can. When you in that little cell, ain't no wider than this here. You had to put something on your mind, so all I did was read the Bible and study and draw. Most I draw with an ink pen, because a pencil, I mess up with a pencil. See, that's the way I got good. I had to set myself for using an ink pen, because if I mess up, I done messed up the whole card. That's what made me get good like that, just using an ink pen. So you can erase with a pencil, but with an ink pen, you can't erase. My artwork, it really kept my mind focused off a lot of things. It kept my mind focused off a lot, because when you're doing artwork, your mind be at ease. So I had to get my mind together with the support from my family to go ahead, because my mama had told me, say, you go down there and you do right, because God gonna bring you out. These are her words with tears in her eyes.
Once we heard about Brooks' case and in doing legal research came across the facts of the case, you know, we were just floored. I mean, to us, it seemed that you have 2 child abductions of toddlers from the middle of the night with a similar sexual assault, and the bodies had been both deposited in bodies of water very close to the house. The crimes happened less than, 18 months apart. I mean, to us, it just seemed that you had a serial pedophile out there, that the same person committed both crimes.
That wasn't obvious to the people in law enforcement down in Noxubee. We asked them, in fact, when you saw this first girl killed, and then you saw it happen again 18 months later, did you ever think it might be the same person? And they said, oh no, it couldn't be the same person, because we had the first person locked up. Go figure.
Can you believe that? Because that other case is closed, it's not possible that they're connected, because we closed it. That's how law enforcement thinks, by the way.
It was just amazing. It was inconceivable to us that at some point these cases wouldn't have been investigated as potentially having been committed by the same person. So Brooks was always in the back of our mind as we were moving forward with some of the litigation in the Brewer case. And ultimately, we were able to get testing in Brooks' case through our litigation on behalf of Brewer, because that would have been evidence that we could present if there had been a retrial that someone else committed the crime, if we were able to link the DNA from Brewer's rape kit to the DNA from the Brooks rape kit.
They made arrangements to have the evidence shipped from Mississippi to a lab in Richmond, California, right outside of San Francisco, Dr. Edward Blake's lab.
I was contacted by Peter Neufeld and Vanessa Potkin to become involved in the case. There had been work that had already been done by another laboratory, and that work showed, or certainly suggested, that there were 2 males that had left spermatozoa on the child victim's vaginal swabs. The peculiarity of the finding certainly suggested, certainly to me and I think to 2 others, that if it was possible, the analysis of the vaginal swab should be repeated. Ultimately, in a second round of testing that we did, we got the remaining portion of the vaginal swab, and we proceeded to do the testing on that vaginal swab. That testing revealed that there was spermatozoa, and that analysis itself showed that, in fact, there was only 1 spermatozoa source from the vaginal swab.
1 source.
So Dr. Blake discovers that there's only 1 sperm source, and that it's not Kennedy Brewer. As it happens, when law enforcement in Mississippi gathered the evidence in the Brewer case, in the Brooks case, they sent to Dr. Blake's lab a bunch of evidence that Brewer's lawyers didn't know existed. And so
Oh.
Dr. Blake, when he opened these boxes, had all kinds of other evidence available to him, including, if you recall, the cheek swabs that had been taken from all of the suspects that had been rounded up as a matter of course in both the Brewer case and in the Brooks case.
And that includes the actual perpetrator.
But as it turned out, the evidence from the Brooks case was too degraded. It hadn't been stored properly, it was too old, and it could not be tested. On the other hand, as it turned out, the evidence in Kennedy Brewer's case was still good. It was still testable. All those cheek swabs that they had taken from the suspects were still in decent enough condition to test. So Dr. Blake decided he would take the profile that he had generated, the single profile, and sort of compare it to the profiles that he might be able to get off of those old cheek swabs.
Of course, we had no real expectation that doing those other samples was going to reveal anything. It just was something that absolutely needed to be done. So the way that this kind of an analysis works, of course, is work done in the laboratory. There's data that's generated on instruments, and that data is all electronic in nature. And part of my role in the investigations that are done here is to take that data, go through and analyze it and intercompare the samples. And so I'm sitting at my computer and I'm going through this data, and can I use a 4-letter word? I'm sitting at my computer and I'm going, holy shit, we've identified the sperm source. It's Justin Johnson.
How about that? The police had the actual suspect all along from the very beginning, but they didn't go that route because they were focused too much on the boyfriend.
I realized the impact that that would have right away, and shortly after making that finding, the first thing I did, of course, was called Peter and Vanessa. They were extremely excited about it, and then they knew things about Justin Johnson that I did not know.
The police had Johnson as a suspect in the Brooks case, had Johnson as a suspect in the Brewer case. And why was Johnson a suspect? He was a suspect because he lived down the road and he had just been arrested and was being prosecuted at the time for breaking into somebody else's trailer and starting to sexually assault a teenage girl. The whole reason we had his DNA was because it had been taken in connection with Smith, and he was on their radar at the time.
You know, you can go today, just as you could have then, and looked at the two case files and the receipts and the motions and everything else that was being filed. And if you pull out the receipts from Knoxville County General Hospital, which are still in the files, and lay them out on the clerk's desk, you know, there's a dozen or so on the Brooks case, not quite as many from the Brewer case because it happened further out in the country, there weren't as many people. And there's one name that is on both sets of receipts.
Yep.
And it's Justin Albert Johnson. I mean, it is not at all an exaggeration to say that if the prosecution and law enforcement investigation of Justin Albert Johnson had been handled correctly, competently, in Levon Brooks's case, Christine Jackson would likely be alive today, and she would be graduating from high school.
Exactly. If law enforcement did their job the first time, she would be graduating high school around now, or whenever this this was 2019, so yeah, around then she'd be graduating. She'd be graduating college probably now.
We became obviously convinced that Albert Johnson was the real perpetrator and the two men were in prison completely innocent. We couldn't go back to Forrest Allgood. After all, he had prosecuted them and he had a vested interest. So we went to the Attorney General.
As soon as it came to me, we did an investigation and we found the right guy, thanks to the defense lawyers in this case that brought it to us.
And the reason it was so critical to involve the Attorney General's office is that at this point, Brooks' case was closed. And we recognized that at that point, Brooks' exoneration, because there was no DNA, would be dependent upon what Albert Johnson was willing to admit to and what he had been involved in.
They picked up Albert Johnson, they recorded the whole interrogation. He volunteered that he had in fact abducted both little girls, had sexually assaulted them, and had murdered them.
In 1992, Levon Brooks was convicted of a capital murder and rape of his ex-girlfriend's 3-year-old daughter. 3 years later, a Lowndes County jury convicted Kennedy Brewer of capital murder and rape of a 3-year-old girl in a separate case. Albert Johnson, who lived in the community where both victims were abducted and killed, confessed to both crimes, thereby clearing Brooks and Brewer. On Friday, both men are expected to be exonerated in Noxubee County. Candace Crone, WLBT News.
Brewer, the order's been signed. You and the sureties on your bond are hereby discharged. You're free to go.
What the Lord done done for me, He saved me from death row. I ain't never give up hope. I sure didn't. Honest the truth from my heart. I never gave up on Kenny.
I stayed locked up 15 years for something I ain't gonna do. They put me on death row, but I just kept my faith that I'd get out one day, and I'm out now.
Levon Brooks, you are free to go.
God been by my side. He know my heart. He know what type of guy I was. So he stood by me. No matter how hard it was during time, God stood by me and brought me back out. Now I can be with my family.
And what's so incredible about these cases, these are capital cases. One man was sentenced to life and the other man was sentenced to death. And they would have ended up that way but for the serendipitous intervention of DNA testing. And but for the confession recorded, we wouldn't have been able to help Mr. Brooks at all because there was no DNA evidence.
Well, I've always said that none of us want to convict the wrong guy. That's your nightmare experience. You know, the thing about it is, we can do our best. I mean, we try to do our best because we don't take these things lightly. But we can do our best and we can still make mistakes.
What if they had took my life and then found out I didn't do it then? What he would have had to say then? You know, but I just can't walk around being angry, you know, so it's done, it's over. I just had to live life now.
I really done got it all out of my mind because when I left, I had said then my attitude that when I was in the penitentiary, the way I was thinking in the penitentiary, I left all that there. So I had to come back and be a new person. So I left all of that there when I left.
I thought it was over the things that I like to do. I thought it was over with. And when I was in prison, I thought it was over with. But I feel 100% good now since I'm out. I've been able to enjoy the things that I like to do, and this one of them, deer hunt. Maybe something will step out every minute.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today, here in the sight of God and in the face of this company, to join together this man and this woman in holy matrimony. Kenny, will thou have this woman to be thy wedded wife? Will thou love her, comfort her, honor and keep her in sickness and in health, and forsaking all others to keep the only unto her as long as thou shalt live?
I really do.
All right. By the power possessed in me by the state of Mississippi, I do pronounce you man and wife in the name of Jesus Christ and in the Holy Ghost. You may kiss your bride. Welcome. Welcome. Mr. and Mrs. Kenny Janella Brewer. Amen? Praise God.
If I had wings,
I fly away if I had wings. I fly away. Now if I had wings, I fly away from down here.
And I lost my mom. When she was here, she was suffering and stuff like that. But I know she gone to a better place, and God that's tired of she suffering. But I did get to be with her a year. And some.
I was muted. 1 year. He got 1 year with her after he got out of prison. Finally. That is time robbed that he could have had with his mother on the outside of prison walls. Instead, he got the 15 years away from his mother, away from his family. 15 years of that relationship that was strained. I guarantee the mother was suffering under a lot of stress because her son was in prison for a crime that he didn't commit. So I guarantee that it stressed her out, and that probably caused an early demise, because stress and things like court proceedings, going to jail, that all is very, very, very stressful. And as we do know, stress can manifest in our bodies in ways that physically harm us and can ultimately end our lives as well. So we can manifest stress. So her life might have been shortened due to a wrongful conviction back in when Levon Brooks was wrongfully convicted, and then Kennedy Brewer. So it's a ripple effect. It's all a ripple effect.
A month before she passed, and in Georgia. That's the most important thing, that God didn't take her once I was locked up, because I probably couldn't even took that. But I enjoyed every minute of it. Because I still think about it every day.
Last Sunday was Levon's 51st birthday, and a bunch of us in the office were trying to figure out, what we should get him. And he really likes Daryl Hall and John Oates, so we splurged and got Hall & Oates Super Hits, which has Private Eyes on it, and Maneater. He's gonna love it. But we felt like there ought to be something sort of push it over the top, so we went ahead and got him a $50,000 check also.
So we went to the Mississippi legislature not long after Kenny and Levon were exonerated, and started talking to people there about the need for a law to compensate innocent people who were wrongly imprisoned. The members of the legislature agreed, and in 2009 passed a law providing compensation in cases like this in the amount of $50,000 for each year of imprisonment, with a cap of $500,000.
Now, he's going to say it's not, it's definitely not worth someone's life, $500,000. It's, someone losing 15, 16 years in prison. How do you put a price on that? But having to do so, it's not enough. But the Supreme Court did agree to it. So thankfully, there is some repercussions in Mississippi when someone is wrongfully convicted. It's not probably nearly enough, but it is something to help them, because their lives are ruined. Their whole lives have been taken from them, especially their ages. They were young when they went in, and now it's 20 years, 15, 16 years later, and everything's different. Technology is different. How do you start to live a life back in normal society outside of prison? It's got to be difficult.
Now, that's not nearly enough money to compensate somebody for the sheer tragedy of living in prison for something you didn't do. But it's better than nothing, and it's certainly an improvement over what existed, and it is going to give these guys at least a little bit of money to help them as they're putting their lives back together.
What else can we do for you?
Well, listen, they just let me know when it opens. You know,
When he can get a donation out of
when
that.
I can get something out.
Probably tomorrow. I mean, it's the state of Mississippi, so.
Okay.
All right. Oh. I'm just happy for you, baby.
I'm happy too.
Yeah. Like you said, it ain't all about the money. No,
Nope.
it ain't.
It's about the freedom.
The freedom we got.
That means more than anything than money. Really, I'm happy.
But think about the money that they could have been making to supporting their family for all those 16 years when they were in prison, and how their family suffered. They didn't have a father figure. Those children didn't have their father, and grew up probably not knowing him very well and missing that relationship in their lives. It's all a ripple effect. So many people affected when there's a wrongful conviction.
Yep, I am too. I just get over with it. I'm just take one day at a time now. Just move forward.
Mm-hmm. But it's a blessing for both of us. Really, it is.
Yep.
I've been doing this now for 17 years, and I can tell you I have never gotten tired of walking into a prison and taking someone by the hand and walking them into the light of day. But what's particularly important about these cases is not only did we exonerate 2 innocent men, one from death row and the other from a life sentence, and identify the real perpetrator of both crimes so there could be some closure, but we also illuminated for the first time a very serious systemic problem in criminal and capital justice here in Mississippi. That is that a guy named Michael West had testified in maybe 20, 25 capital and murder cases, and that a Dr. Stephen Hain was doing 1,500 autopsies a year for 20 years. There's 62 people on death row in Mississippi. He testified as a witness in maybe 40 of those cases.
Repeat that. 62 D-row cases. This not very credible doctor who went with the bite mark expert has been behind at least 40 of those. Maybe. This is what this guy is saying. So that's crazy. Oops, here we go.
You know, the National Association of Medical Examiners says an individual doctor should do no more than 250 autopsies a year. If you do more than 325, they'll refuse to certify.
Oh, I misquoted it. I said 125 to 150. It's 200 to 325.
Regardless of the circumstances. Hain was doing 1,500 to 1,800 autopsies per year by his own admission. You know, Hain was never board certified in forensic pathology. He took the test in the 80s and he failed it. He walked out in the middle of it. He never took it again. Yet he repeatedly testified in court that he was board certified in forensic pathology. Why didn't the American Board of Pathology ever take action against that? But it's really hard to imagine how someone could have a more damaging, one person could have a more damaging impact on the criminal justice system than Dr. Hain has had. When you figure that he has testified in 80 to 90% of the homicide cases in Mississippi over 20 years, it's really kind of mind-blowing when you think about all the people that he's put in prison and all the people that, you know, probably maybe should have gone to prison that didn't because of this guy. And then you also have his association with Dr. Michael West.
Down a little bit, please.
Okay, you ready?
Oh,
Uh-huh.
yeah, like that. Go for it, Steve. You really ought to contact it a little bit before.
Do it again.
I was muted. They are literally making the bite marks in the skin of the girls. They are literally making the impressions and not the other way around. They're not matching impressions to something that's already there. They're making the impressions.
Yeah.
We ready to open him up, Steve? No.
Huh?
No.
All right, put the 2 centrals down. Roll it to the hospital.
In both cases, you had testimony from Dr. West that really sealed the deal. He came into court and in both cases, you know, was very adamant that marks on the little girl's body were human bite marks and had been caused by Levon Brooks in his case to the exclusion of everybody else and Kennedy Brewer in his case. And in fact, they're not even bite marks. You know, we know this for several reasons. The Innocence Project, when we came on board Brewer's case, we reached out to the leading odontologists and we gave them the materials from Christine Jackson's body, had them review. Their conclusion unanimously, these are not human bite marks. And furthermore, they were able to demonstrate that Dr. West himself created a mark on Christine Jackson's body when he took the dentition of Kennedy Brewer and pressed it up against Christine Jackson's body during the autopsy.
Yep.
Great, great. Do it again. Super.
But there have been lots of forensic scandals where a doctor is shown to have been either corrupt or incompetent or a rubber stamp for prosecutors. The difference is that when these other frauds have been exposed, state officials have expressed remorse, have set up, commissions, have reopened hundreds of cases, looked back. There was sort of a general sense of shame and remorse, and they went back and tried to correct the problem. So far in Mississippi, that really hasn't happened with Hain or West. There's been a real obstinance among state officials to go back and look at just how much damage these guys have done to the criminal justice system.
Because if they made these kinds of, I even don't know if I could call it mistakes, if they made these kinds of serious errors in the Brooks and Brewer case, then it only stands to reason that there are almost certainly other people who have been victims of the same invalid scientific methods.
Exactly. How many other people are sitting in prison because of these non-credible, inexperienced experts, so-called, in order to put people away? They make the evidence fit their narrative, and that is the exact wrong way to do any kind of investigative or scientific work.
This guy was in his bed, he's being smothered, he's clawing this guy's arms. I said, I'll tell you why. Not only do I believe, you know how the cops are you sure, doctor? I said, yeah, I just want to strap him in a chair and kill him. I'm sure. These fingernails make these marks. I said,
what we see in these cases are what we see in a lot of cases throughout the country, that people who contribute to wrongful convictions, whether law enforcement officers, forensic scientists, prosecutors, who help convict an innocent person through wrongdoing, are almost never held accountable.
Right.
They continue on many times in their careers, promotions, collecting pensions, and it's really outrageous in a society that's allegedly premised, our whole criminal justice system is premised on holding people accountable for what they do. But
Exactly. These people are not being held accountable for their crimes. It is a crime. I would think it should be a crime to put an innocent person in prison. If we need to start making our prosecutors and our experts and people accountable for providing wrong information and deliberately misleading juries and things like that. We need to start taking that more seriously.
When it comes to people who play a role in a wrongful conviction, there's absolutely no accountability.
By nature, we want to trust our authorities. You want to trust the police. You want to trust the judicial system, the judges, the prosecutors, the lawyers. And it's our nature to trust, those people. But the system's broken, and we send innocent people to prison every week in this country.
Do you think that there are innocent people in prison in Mississippi right now? Is it a worrisome thought?
Well, certainly this instance makes you think, that there could be. It's there again, many of them will have the opportunity to do more testing now, and I think in the future we will reduce that number greatly if there are any up there. I mean, every one of them up there claim they're innocent.
People are always afraid that the system is going to malfunction. I think everybody's nightmare is that an innocent person gets executed. Well, in a very real sense, the system failed in both these cases. But then yet and still, in a very real sense, the system worked. Nobody died.
Nobody died. That's his excuse. First of all, he is the system. So if the system's broken, if the system didn't work, it's partly your fault because you are the system. You and the law enforcement that is behind you and all the experts that you seek out to back up your evidence. So you're the central point, Mr. Prosecutor. This is the person who prosecuted them. But he says it's broken. The system's broken. But everything comes to him. He's the one that decides if he's going to prosecute a case or not. Well, that's good. Wait, he went to Haiti? Is that what that just said? Oh, Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Sorry. So that guy, the forensics examiner, still is testifying in cases. And even though like the city, whatever or the county of Nuxabee got rid of him, but he's still potentially putting innocent people away by his testimony. Well, what did you guys think? I thought that was an excellent depiction of how the ripple effect does take effect when someone is wrongfully convicted and what effects it has on the justice system, our society as a whole, and just the people that are a part of the system, the people who put the people away. They're part of the problem, but they don't see it. Like his comments like, well, we did what we could. We did the best we could at the time. I get that, but maybe your best needs to be better. Maybe you need to have better practices and better systems in place, and go back and look at the cases. They said they didn't look at any of the cases that were done with those experts on the stand. They should go back and look at them and just reevaluate the evidence and make sure that the people that are in prison for it are actually the people who did it. That would be my recommendation, although who am I to them? They're not going to listen to me. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Innocence Lost with Kennedy Brewer and Levon Brooks. Levon Brooks, may he rest in peace. Kennedy Brewer, I hope that he finds what he is seeking when it comes to, starting your life over after being in prison for 15 years, not seeing your kids grow up, and just not being believed. How would you feel to not be believed by people, especially people that you knew and trusted your whole lives, and then suddenly you're accused of a crime that you didn't commit, you're in prison, and people that you used to know, they look down upon you now because they think that you did this horrific crime that you didn't do. I just think it's awful. But thankfully, these two have both been cleared. Their names are cleared. Their conscience is cleared. So Levon Brooks, rest in peace. And Kennedy Brewer, I hope that you find your happiness in life. And with that, I will tell you, my viewers, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you have any wrongful convictions that you would like to share with me, if you have any real true crime stories that you'd like to share, please email me at crimeandcourtchannel@gmail.com. I appreciate your stories and your thoughts on the cases that I present, and suggestions too. So again, thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like this video. I always forget to say that at the beginning. Please like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. If you've been impacted by a true crime and would like your story told in your own words, or if you or someone you know has been wrongfully convicted or accused of a crime, please write to crimeandcourtchannel@gmail.com and tell us your real true crime encounters. Thanks for watching.